The Turbo Hayabusa is the apex predator of the motorcycling world, but despite its status as the pinnacle, forced induction has remained pretty elusive in the two-wheeled realm. Which is weird because when it comes to cars, everything from pedestrian crossovers to ultimate hypercars have turbochargers inside and under the hood. Well boys, it looks like things are finally starting to change. In the past few months, both Yamaha and Honda have unveiled patents for turbocharged motorcycles. Yeah, boosted bikes from the factory. You heard me right. Honda, of course, is working on their electric compressor in their V3 concept that they teased at EICMA last year. And Yamaha has now jumped on a similar bandwagon with another electric compressor design. So today we're going to dive into the past, present, and future of boosted motorcycles. I'm going to show you guys why this may be the future of motorcycling. I'll tell you why they didn't take off in the 80s, why Kawasaki's H2 supercharger may be more of a flex than a viable solution, and why now may be the moment that we finally get real deal turbo bikes. Let's unspool back in time to the 1980s. You get it? The 80s was an era of maximalism, excess, and hubris. What better time than to develop insane death trap turbocharged motorcycles? Reagan's time in office didn't hurt either, as his policy for instituting tariffs on large displacement motorcycles forced the Big Four to adapt. Harley-Davidson could build as big of an engines as they wanted to, but the Japanese were limited to a certain size unless they wanted to incur massive cost increases, so the solution became pretty obvious. Honda gave us the CX500 Turbo, Yamaha had the XJ650 Turbo, Suzuki had the XN85, and Kawasaki brought the GPZ750 Turbo. On paper, it made a ton of sense. I mean, what's not to love? A small engine producing more power. But the thing about it was, these motorcycles were expensive novelties at best and unwieldy homicidal beasts to ride at worst. Turbo lag, bad fueling, poor suspension, poor brakes, and a really complicated design made these motorcycles unpopular with basically all manner of street riders. Imagine being on the side of the tire, leaned over, picking up the gas, and you get unexpected levels of boost from your motorcycle. With no advanced fuel mapping or electronic rider aids, your bike would all of a sudden deliver about 50% more power than you had anticipated, and all you had to save you was 1980s suspension and tire technology. Tariffs eventually lightened, and the engineering prowess of these manufacturers kept increasing. Soon after the turbo bikes were released, manufacturers were able to get back to the business of making naturally aspirated motors that were larger and making as much, if not more power than the turbo bikes, more reliably and more simply. And all those turbo bikes were quickly shelved after just a few years in production. That must have been a giant headache for those manufacturers. Since then, there's only been one forced induction motorcycle that's made its way past the prototype phase onto the world stage, and that's the Kawasaki H2 and its derivative models such as the ZH2 and H2 SX SE. These bikes are supercharged, brutally fast, and very expensive. It's not the type of bike you would buy to commute with or even do a track day with unless you're into creatine maxing. They're mostly for highway pulls and flexing on Instagram. So if turbo bikes were such a flop back in the day, what leads me to believe that we're on the precipice of some beautiful forced induction future? Well, at EICMA in 2024, Honda unveiled a radical new concept of a 75-degree V3 motorcycle with an electric compressor shoved inside of it. This compressor spins independently of exhaust gases, as is typically found in most turbo applications, and it instead uses an electric motor. This means you eliminate virtually all turbo lag with this, which is really the bane of a turbo motorcycle. Take it from me, as a guy who has owned an honest-to-God turbocharged motorcycle in the form of my old Turbo Hayabusa, spooling boost on a bike is terrifying. Terrifyingly fun, but still terrifying. Oh, that wasn't even wide open. I'm too scared to wide open throttle it. It's so much. The electric compressor is designed to stay cool and compact, meaning there's no need for an intercooler. Honda executives have stated publicly that they've actually tested a road-going prototype, and they do have plans to move forward with a road-going model. I'll tell you guys what, if and when the deposits open up for this V3 Turbo Honda, my name is going to be first on the list. I mean, come on, giveaway factory turbo bike? Sign me up. They've even gone as far as to trademark the V3R name in the US. And look, Honda is no stranger to oddball motorcycle designs. You may be forgiven for thinking this, but this was their bread and butter for decades, was making weird one-off engines. In the not too distant past, Honda was making oval piston superbikes with 32 valves. They also made a V5 engine in MotoGP that was the most winning motorcycle at that time. Honda's approach to their e-turbo V3 is multifaceted. On the one hand, it opens up a brand new frontier for performance, and on the other hand, it solves for the tightening emissions regulations and keeping a motorcycle that's more efficient. Ultimately, it should be more realistic and attainable than something like a Kawasaki H2, but still more fun and unique than your average 650cc middleweight bike. More recently, Yamaha has also had patents describing these new turbo systems that they plan on installing on their bikes. Yamaha quietly tested their e-turbo concept on their CP3 platform back in 2020, where that application made 180 horsepower and 130 foot-pounds of torque out of an 847cc triple. Pretty good numbers if you ask me. Oh yeah, and it also reduced CO2 emissions by 30%. That's going to look pretty good to the European Commission. Their recent patent filings show a compact e-turbo setup very similar to the Honda's V3. This optimizes for minimal turbo lag and engine heat. Manufacturers have been experimenting with alternative engine design and configurations for decades now, even in the motorcycling space. I mean, even Suzuki was going to put an e-turbo concept on their new 776cc twin that's found in the GSX-8 platforms, but ultimately they decided it'd be too exciting and they went with bold new graphics instead. I feel like boosted motorcycles are going to ride the same wave that we saw automatic bikes do, where Honda launched their DCT and nobody cared, and then sooner rather than later, everybody had some sort of automatic bike offering. And maybe boosted bikes will be the same thing. Kawasaki set the tone in 2015 with their H2, and now 10 years later, everybody's scrambling to come up with a boosted application. Now look, you know we don't like talking about cars on this channel. That's no secret. They're for small-brained enthusiasts with more garage space than actual skill. But if we're talking about the mass proliferation of forced induction engines, we can't not talk about the last 20 years in the automotive space, because it's been kind of crazy. Back in the day, if you wanted a turbo car, it meant probably getting something German and expensive. Similarly, the Japanese started turbocharging everything in the pursuit of ultimate power. But then emissions laws tightened and fuel economy became a selling point, and manufacturers quickly realized that they could add forced inductions to their engines and meet these new stringent requirements. Turbos allowed those engines to keep the power up and the fuel consumption down in these applications. Now you got turbos in literally everything, from Chevy Malibus to Ford Escapes to, I don't know, probably your lawnmower at home. As turbos became more common, the supporting tech around it became more common too. You saw direct injection, advanced ECUs and fuel mapping, knock sensors, electronically controlled wastegates, and not to mention safety features like traction control and ABS. And turbos aren't the only piece of tech that's been distilled down from the four-wheeled world into motorcycling. Fuel injection, ABS, radar-equipped cruise control, and even Apple CarPlay, I guess they call it Bike Play, made its way to motorcycling from cars. While the increasing popularity of turbocharged applications was largely a response to tightening emissions regulations, modifiers and builders have always known that turbos equal power, and they've often been keen to unlock more power out of their stock engines. Being able to downsize without downgrading in power is an exciting idea. Motorcycles already offer otherworldly realms of power-to-weight ratios, but adding boost to the equation could be the missing ingredient to unlock truly god-tier power. Honda's V3 could have the maneuverability of a middleweight bike, but it could have the power of a leader bike. It remains to be seen if the crank size in these applications is going to be as big as other larger displacement engines, because that's typically one of the limiting factors in how nimble and agile a motorcycle feels, is how heavy and big the crank is inside of the engine. Of course, many other factors contribute to this: the rake angle, the wheelbase, and the overall size of the bike. But it's tantalizing to think about a middleweight bike with leader bike power. I mean, heck, imagine if Yamaha boosted their MT-09 and it outgunned the MT-10. And while that may sound far-fetched, we have seen something like this in the past before. In the early 90s, for example, we saw this happening where engineering, quality, design, and manufacturing was progressing so rapidly that something like the Honda Fireblade weighed just a little bit more than the 600s at the time, but was faster than most thousands around a racetrack. Then subsequently, other manufacturers focused more on weight and handling, and all the sport bikes suddenly became way faster and all the better for it. I truly think that forced induction is going to be the next chapter in this equation. I mean, it just makes sense when you start thinking about it. Now look, we already saw the big four try this once back in the day with turbocharging bikes. But things are radically different now. Manufacturers have so much more tech to throw at this problem of turbo lag, bad suspension, bad design, and unwieldy riding. I mean, if Ducati can make a 240 horsepower leader bike rideable to the average Joe, surely we can figure out a turbocharged middleweight bike. For one, we have electronic throttles and advanced fuel mapping. We have very advanced traction control and ABS, meaning that if boost were to spike at an inopportune moment, well, the TC can save you. Bikes run with multiple ride modes nowadays, and it could be a possibility that you could have a non-turbo mode and a turbo mode and change the fuel mapping to suit one or the other. You could throw it into sport boost mode and get 50 extra horsepower at your disposal. All of these things make forced induction safer and more manageable for riders. Again, take it from me, a guy who's owned a turbocharged bike that had no traction control, cable actuated throttle, and no ABS. It was terrifying to ride. But I also had the chance to own a ZH2 and a Kawasaki H2, and even that leap from about 15 years on of the Busa that I owned felt like a quantum jump in terms of technology and rider safety. I mean, really consider the fact that all these e-turbo systems are going to use an electric motor instead of exhaust gases to control the amount of boost. In theory, an ECU should be able to finely tune and dial in the amount of power that compressor puts out. Essentially, all of the obstacles that made 1980s turbo bikes unwieldy and crazy to ride have been solved for, and it makes us primed and ready for turbo bikes today. With all that being said, there are still many obstacles that remain. Motorcycles have way less room to accommodate mechanical changes inside the engine and the chassis. That means that they're going to have a pretty hard time finding their way to package all of this stuff into existing models. It may require several frame and chassis updates to shoehorn turbos onto these engines. The other elephant in the room is that turbos get hot, really hot. Now, that's not a problem when the turbo is safely tucked away behind the heat wall of an engine compartment inside of an automobile, but on a motorcycle, when it's literally straddled between your legs, that might pose an issue. Cue all the Ducati owners quickly telling us that heat on the engine is no problem. The e-compressors that both Honda and Yamaha are piloting out in their patents seem to be packaged and set up in a way that's trying to address that, but time will tell how effective that's going to be. The H2 with its supercharger, for example, gets very, very hot. Having to accommodate an intercooler would be a massive challenge for packaging for motorcycle manufacturers as well. And of course, in the year of our Lord and Savior Rossi 2025, we cannot talk about turbos on bikes without talking about cost. A new and genuinely novel motorcycle design is not going to be cheap to make. On top of the R&D costs that are ultimately going to be passed down to you as a consumer, you're also going to have to incur a lot of additional mechanical costs to keep the turbos on this bike running correctly. There could also be issues in countries that have specific licensing requirements around engine displacements. Some countries even have certain taxes written into the certain engine sizes found in motorcycles, and small boosted bikes could upend a lot of that. And lastly, there's the problem of culture. Motorcyclists are unfortunately pretty resistant to change. I mean, we see this all the time with how they don't want their inline 4 machines to go anywhere by way of triples and twins. How are they going to react to turbocharged bikes? After 5 to 10 years of endless EV talk inside the two-wheeled world, it's exciting to see internal combustion engines making a big comeback and seeing further development. Whether it's for emissions compliance or simply for more power and cool whooshing noises, Yamaha and Honda's new electric turbo patents are something to be very excited about in the motorcycling space. If or when these motorcycles come to market, we're probably not going to see Turbo Hayabusa levels of absurdity, but we might see new space-age style machines that use the latest and greatest tech and ultimately is a small block of metal containing a bunch of explosions, which is what we all like. So what do you think? Are forced induction motorcycles really coming to the market in the next 3 to 5 years? Or is all this just silly hype from a manufacturer that's completing side quests? Or is it simply just fake news? Will the e-turbo finally be the nail in the coffin of the inline 4 machine? Or will we now have purists who bemoan the fact that naturally aspirated motorcycles truly were the best? And hell, maybe between twins, triples, and boosted bikes, perhaps the scream of the inline 4 will finally be silenced. How sad. Let me know what you think down in the comments below and hit the link to this video right over here to learn a little bit more about motorcycle engines. We did this awesome video about inline 4s versus V4s that you're not going to want to miss. So go and click that link. What are you waiting for? I'm not going anywhere. Not until you hit it.